Welcome to the fifth and final week session of this Bible study called Tech for Humans. We have been talking about the place of technology in our lives, going back to the biblical story of creation and making our way forward to our modern day, where it fits into our lives now, how we use it to form the world, and how technology forms us. So we've made it through all the sessions leading up to tonight. This is the last one. I've learned some things about this format. I'll talk about those at the end of the class. Um, Tonight it will be a little bit different. I'm recording this at night, so I say tonight, than what I originally had anticipated. This session is called Living and Dying. And what I had originally hoped to do was talk about the way that technology enters into our life in terms of how we live with it and also how we die in this modern age. Technology has become a part of the medical field in many ways, from the very beginning of our life to the end of our life. So it was going to be a class quite a bit focused on medical technology, which is really worthy a topic of discussion, and we'll talk about that in other ways. But instead, I've transformed by popular demand. Maybe I know a number of people have been very interested, especially very recently, in the ideas of artificial intelligence, or AI for short, which also enters into the idea of living and what it means to be alive, what makes us different from, say, supercomputers, which are approaching closer and closer to appearing to communicate in ways that humans do. So instead of talking about what I originally was going to talk about, we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about AI and that kind of thing, because I know that especially in the last 6 months has become a big topic of discussion among many people. So let's have at it and see where it goes. As a kind of review of all the things we've talked about, we began with this idea of the message and the medium in technology, and dispelling the myth that technology is just kind of the transparent carrier to get whatever content is coming to us. Because in fact, technology, not just the content, but the way it brings content in our lives, has its own effects, and it shapes us. Hearing, watching a movie is different from hearing a book, or it is different from hearing a book on tape. You know, it's the content may be the same, but the technology itself changes us. We talked about social media and relationships, how technology can enhance but also inhibit the way that we relate to one another. And especially with modern electronics and screens and advent of screens everywhere all the time, how that has changed the way we think, how it has changed the way we relate to one another, and all sorts of things. We talked about routines and habits in our last session, how technology fits into the daily rhythms of our lives, and how that pattern, daily pattern, shapes us, how it should be shaping us, how it could be shaping us. Tonight we're going to get into our last topic, as I mentioned. And so as we begin, though, because we're talking about living and dying, I want to talk about the technology of death and the technology of life. And I'm going to start by showing you a photograph of one of the most brutal pieces of technology ever invented. You ready to see it? All right, here it is. That's right, it's the cross. Now, as Christians, we have so many layers of meaning on top of the cross that we don't often think of it, but this is a technology. The cross was a technology of death. If you think about it, it is one of the most fearful, elegant, creative, efficient technologies for doing what it did that humans have ever invented. It'd really be admirable if it wasn't so violent in the way that just a couple pieces of wood could not only torture someone, but could torture someone for a long time publicly without letting them escape, without requiring hardly any labor at all. Once a person was hung on the cross, you basically just had to guard and make sure no one let them down, and the cross did the work itself. We began in this series by talking about the bicycle as a great metaphor for technology, that the bicycle doesn't give humans superpowers, it just helps them use the power that they already have in a much more efficient way than they could do without it. Well, the cross does the same thing. It allows one human or a group of humans, typically a government, to publicly shame, torture, and kill someone with just the minimum of effort. Truly, the cross is a technology of death that is surprisingly efficient. If a computer is like a bicycle for the mind, then the cross is like a bicycle for death. But Christians do not typically see it this way anymore. Why? Because God used a human-created technology of death for the purposes of life, for doing something new, for redemption, for saving, for salvation for all people. Isn't it interesting that God used a human piece of technology for this purpose? And not just a neutral human technology piece, but a evil, violent, destructive, death-filled human piece of technology that God chose to turn the world upside down, to save us, to redeem us. Interesting that God did not just wipe the slate clean, but instead used what we had made for evil and turned it for something good. Really incredible that God does this and what it tells us about technology. This is not the only case of this as well. We have used a lot of the text from Genesis in this Bible study because the story of creation sets up for us as humans not just who we are, and what the world is, but what our role is in it. As we noted, a role that includes using technology for the good of the world, for order, for development, for our neighbors. All of that is built into creation. And the metaphor used and the place of that creation, the original design for humans, was in a garden. A mostly natural setting. Although if you think about it, a garden, even still, is not just nature. A garden is nature with tools, with technology used by people for production, for abundance, for life. But as sin entered the equation, as humans had to leave that garden that was prepared for humans by God, they went out into the world. In the book of Genesis, at the end of our Christian scriptures, at the opposite end of the Bible from this story in creation, we get a new creation. It's really lovely bookends for the scriptures. But there's some differences. In this new creation, we are not just sent back to the garden, although elements of the garden are there. Let's read from the 21st chapter of Revelation. It says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband." In the new creation, the new thing that God promises to do, the image of the garden has been enhanced and has now become a city, a holy city. Whereas the garden was created by God for humans, cities, on the other hand, are a completely human creation. God didn't make the first city. God made the garden. Humans came together to make cities. In fact, cities are a technology. Cities are a specialized human technology where different things come together to help us do what we could not do spread out over the countryside. And when God makes things new, when God redeems the world from all of its brokenness, God uses, just like the cross, God uses a human technology, something that humans have created for good, for this new thing that God is creating together with us, joining in our need and our indeed calling as humans to create using technology. God partners with us to make a new heaven and a new earth using that technology. Isn't that profound? Think about that. Think about all the things that come with a city. If you've spent time in big cities, you may have the impression that I have, for instance, when I lived in a large American city, that cities are filled with both the best of humanity and the worst of humanity, all kind of squashed into one place. They are basically humanity just compressed. Some of the most incredible things, artwork, cultures, music, groups, organizations that I've ever worked with have been in large cities. But some of the worst tendencies of people, addiction and crime and violence, have also been in cities. Cities are human technologies, which means they have all of the good and the evil that come along with things, anything that humans wrap our hands around. And yet, God uses the city to do something new, to make a new heaven and a new earth. Revelation goes on, "And the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as a crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city." So out of and through this human creation flows the glory of God, the river of the water of life. God's Spirit, which fills us, moves through a city that is at least in part created with humanity, a human technology. How else is God using the technology of humanity for redemption, turning something that was a place of death into a place of life? And where in our modern technology, even in the realm of electronics and computers, might God be doing the same? That's what I want to think about as we switch into this idea of our life, living with artificial technology, and where God might be moving in it, but where sin and destruction might be moving in it as well. I'll explain a little bit about what I mean when I say artificial intelligence. Not everyone might mean the same thing, but specifically, I'm going to talk about the artificial intelligence that a lot of people have recently been talking about. That is just as we are in 2023, broken out kind of to the big spotlight, which is artificial intelligence based on large language models and the ability to communicate with them. So, and the big one that many people have been talking about recently is called ChatGPT. So, one way that we can learn what ChatGPT is to ask ChatGPT, because it functions like you can ask a question to this model, and the model will produce an answer. So I asked it, what is ChatGPT in 25 words? Because I didn't want to be here all night. And what was produced was ChatGPT is a large language model by OpenAI. That's the organization, foundation, corporation now that built it, trained on a massive text corpus to generate human-like responses to text-based prompts. That's a pretty good, succinct definition. Comes in at just about 23 words, so it beat its limitation by just a couple words. So what this means is that this is not like a computer brain that knows all, that's thinking, that's reasoning. A large language model means that all of these written words, all written by humans, or mostly written by humans, have been placed inside this big model, and the computer eats it all up, tries to understand all the linkages, all the reasons that one word predicts what the next word will be. We don't know what is in it, but most people assume it's, for instance, all of Wikipedia. Massive parts of the internet are all sucked into this. Billions and billions and billions of words that the computer understands, and based on statistical probability, will guess in any given word that it writes what the next word will be statistically, and then it figures out what the next most likely word, and it builds until it builds sentences and paragraphs and essays, whatever you ask it, based on the statistical relationships of other words that are in it. So it's probably not thinking in the way that you might imagine what thinking is. And it doesn't necessarily know what right and wrong is, what is true and not true. It just knows what is statistically probable to be the next word in any given sentence. But although that may not sound like a lot, given how much data it has, it's uncanny in how much it might sound like a human or give answers. So maybe you've seen some of these before, but I asked it some pertinent questions for our topic. Like, for instance, I said, describe the life and significance of Jesus Christ in 2 sentences. So I gave it a limitation again. It spit out, Jesus Christ is the central figure of Christianity, believed by Christians to be the Son of God and the Savior of humanity who died for the sins of the world and rose from the dead. His teachings and life have had a profound impact on religious and secular history. Now, that's pretty good, right? I mean, there's nothing in there that you could point at and say, well, that's not true. It has figured out, or it has spit out, based on probability, a couple of sentences that ring quite true. It's probably not the answer that, for instance, you would give. It's not quite the answer that I would give, although that first sentence is pretty much straight out of many religious catechisms, right? It's got the Son of God, Savior of humanity, dying for the sins of the world, rising from the dead. If you only had a few moments, that's pretty good. The second sentence, though, his teachings and life have had a profound impact on religious secular history. That's kind of wishy-washy, right? Which you might expect when it's been trained on just averages across all this writing. Still, though, it's true, and there's nothing wrong with it. The problem that you might encounter if you use these AIs, though, is that it's only as good as the data it's been trained on. If it's been trained on bad data, it will spit out bad data because it doesn't know right from wrong. It just knows what it has read and aggregated and what is statistically likely to come next. But I don't want to sell it short. It can do some amazing things. So here's the next thing I said. Tell me about technology, for our Bible study, in the style of the Gospel of John. So I want it to tell me things about technology, but I want it to do it as if it was writing as the Gospel of John. Listen to what it says. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was technology. And technology was with us from the dawn of civilization, and through it all things were made. It was in the wheels and levers of ancient machines, the gears and pulleys of the Industrial Revolution, and the transistors and silicon of the information age. It's not bad writing, actually. The light of technology shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Through it, we have seen the world grow smaller and our knowledge and understanding expand beyond what we ever thought possible. It has brought us great power, and with power comes great responsibility. Apparently, it's been trained on the comics of Spider-Man. And so we must use technology with wisdom and discernment, for it is a tool that can both build and destroy. Let us remember that the true measure of technology is not in its speed or power, but in how it serves the betterment of humanity. I found that pretty incredible, actually. Although, when you look at it a second time, it doesn't exactly work out. Okay, it's somewhat clever. I said in this Gospel of John, it said in the beginning was the Word was with God, directly lifting from the beginning of the Gospel of John. But then it changes to say, and the Word was technology. And technology was with us from the dawn of civilization, and through it all things were made. Definitely weaving both technology and the Gospel of John together in what seems to be a pretty creative way. Although if you dig deeper into the sentences, it doesn't really make sense. I mean, were all things made through technology? Well, no, human technology, at least our definition of technology, did not create the rocks and the trees and the parts of creation that existed before humans even existed. So it doesn't actually make total sense, but it really sounds like something a person would say. Maybe someone who is just learning how to write creatively would not expect our greatest poets and authors to write like this, of course. But, what do you expect? This is a model that's spitting out statistically probable words and coming out with something pretty amazing. Now, for the last 50 years, when people have talked about artificial intelligence, there have been people who have made all kinds of dire predictions that at some point, the technology of computers and the way that they think will be able to take over, that the computers will become smarter than the humans and will, subjugate us or something. And so, of course, as this new writing technology has come out, this ChatGPT, which has just kind of been made public this past year, widely public, there have been all kinds of people talking about it, and it's the end of this or the end of this. And so a couple of things that maybe as we've gone through this class that we can think about, some perspectives on how we might relate to this technology as people of faith. So the first thing I want to say is that although I'm skeptical of this idea that that's kind of the end of anything, or that it's, the dawn of a new creation, or maybe the dawn of the era where the computers take over, I am skeptical about this. I don't think this spells the end of humanity. Not so much because I think we are overestimating the AI. I'm very impressed by the AI, and I think it will only get better and better. I'm skeptical because I think we are underestimating the incredible miracle of human thinking. The AI, it does something that almost seems magical, but so do humans at a much deeper level in the way we think. One of the things that has happened, I think, as we've learned more and more about how these AIs work by putting together words that are statistically probable. One temptation, and there are a lot of people who think this way, is to guess that maybe humans are thinking or speaking in the same way that these machines are thinking. That at some level, humans too are just saying what is the most statistically probable thing. That kind of like we are machines, and there maybe even be some truth to how our brains function this way. But for us simply to be spitting out words based on what we have heard in the past and how we have simply aggregated them together, I think sells humans very short. It certainly doesn't seem to be compatible with the idea of humans and technology that we find in the Bible. And it certainly doesn't match with the idea that humans have a role, a God-given role to play in using technology to help shape and give order to the world. Because if we are simply machines that are kind of deterministically spitting out what we have taken in, that doesn't really leave place for us to have a creative role. And that creativity of humans goes back to the very beginning, where God put all the animals in front of Adam and asked Adam to name them. God didn't say, memorize these names, put them into your brain so that you can spit them back out. God asked Adam to give names to the animals. I think it shows God's role for us as humans to be creative, to come up with new things, not just based on the order of things that we've heard in the past, but truly novel things. Humans are more than just machines that take things in and spit things out. There's something unique and holy about our role. There's a reason that God created us in creation, said that we were very good, gave us a job to do. So there's more than just what AI is. As AI continues to get better and better, we'll probably be more and more shocked by how human-like it can sound. But I'm still skeptical that it could ever do what humans do. And certainly, there's no indication that machines were given the role, the vocation, the calling that humans are given to help shape the world with God. We use technology, but are not ordered by it, or shouldn't be, anyways. So some things to continue thinking about as we continue to think about the role of technology, the role of even new frontiers of technology like artificial intelligence, to remember both what grounds us as humans, that we have this spirit, this breath of God, that God blows through us and through the technology we use, but first through us as humans to shape the world, to be creative, to love our neighbors, but also how God might use technology to redeem the world. Even technology that has failed, technology that we have used inappropriately for evil, for violence against one another, how God might use those for redemption. So some questions to think about as we conclude this series, but also with this one lesson, but also this series. How might God, or what might God do next to redeem technology in our world? Maybe a technology that has been misused. These days, it very likely might be some kind of digital or computer thing that is causing pain, that is causing destruction, maybe in your life personally, maybe that you see working against society as a whole. What might God be doing next to redeem that, to bring healing through people, though we are flawed, but still entrusted with this call to shape the world and to love one another? Then also more broadly to think about through this study, what have you learned about technology and faith? What has resonated with you in this study? What has not? What have you disagreed with? Some of the main things we've talked about, that technology is never neutral, that it is always working on us for better or for worse, even as we use it. Maybe about our vocation and our role, if you take seriously the words of the creation story in Genesis, how we are called to use technology in the world. The idea of how sin and evil play a role in all of technology, but also how God can use it for good through us. What of that has resonated with you? What of it do you still have questions about? Finally, as we think about technology and how technology forms us, I have to do a little bit of reflecting on the specific technology that I used in this Bible study, because this is different, a different way of doing it than I've done before. One thing I've noticed is that there's been a lot less engagement than I normally get. A lot of people have responded to the questions either in person or online, which kind of proves the point that even though this content, the content would have been basically the same in a class that was taught in person or live on Zoom, there would have been a lot more questions than there is this way. So the technology itself does affect how we interact with things. And so while this way of doing the study made some things better and more convenient, it didn't lead to more engagement. It led to a lot less engagement, actually. So just something to continue thinking about in our lives. What calls us into life? Where are the places where we need to re-examine how we use technology and keep fine-tuning it to always be working towards the light that shines in the darkness that is not technology, no matter what ChatGPT says, but is actually God and God's word working through us, partnering with us in shaping the world. So until we talk again, be well, stay curious about these things, and let's continue this discussion in real life. God bless.